Why Sun Myung Moon's divine principle is far superior than any other interpretation of the Bible. The quest to understand the relationship between God, humanity, and the universe has occupied the greatest minds for millennia. From the towering stone tablets of the ancient Near East to the modern synthesis of science and spirit, the Bible has served as the anchor for Western civilization. Yet, for as many readers as the Bible has had, there have been as many interpretations, a fractured landscape of denominations, dogmas, and competing creeds. Into this labyrinth of contradictions steps the divine principle, the foundational text of the teachings of Sun Myung Moon. To suggest that the divine principle is superior requires a shift in perspective. It is not a claim of superiority in authority, but one of superior architecture. While traditional theology often relies on mystery and paradox to bridge the gaps in Scripture, the divine principle functions as a master key. It provides a comprehensive, logical, and unified framework that transforms the Bible from a collection of episodic narratives into a coherent, scientific, and historical blueprint for the restoration of the human condition. The end of theological fragmentation. The primary challenge of traditional biblical study is the inherent fragmentation of the text. Is the God of the Old Testament a God of wrath and judgment, while the God of the New Testament is a God of love and sacrifice? Why did the Israelites suffer so greatly if they were the chosen people? Why did the Messiah come when he did, and why was he rejected by the very people prepared for his arrival? Conventional theology often dismisses these questions as divine mysteries. The divine principle, however, offers a structural explanation. It posits that the Bible is not merely a record of religious history, but a record of humanity's providence of restoration, a systematic, step-by-step process of healing the broken relationship between God and humankind. By viewing the Bible through the prism of the principle of creation and the principle of restoration, the text stops being a chaotic series of events and becomes a predictable, logical progression. It explains that the failures of the past were not arbitrary tests of faith, but necessary conditions of human responsibility that had to be met before the next stage of salvation could unfold. The logic of the fall, a scientific moral framework. Perhaps the most significant challenge in traditional Christianity is the concept of the original sin. For centuries, the interpretation of the fall of man, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, has been shrouded in symbolic ambiguity. Was it a literal apple? Was it pride? Was it an ontological corruption of human nature? The divine principle provides an exegesis that is both conceptually rigorous and ethically grounding. It identifies the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil as a metaphor for a premature, illicit misuse of love. By framing the fall as a structural breakdown of the human family, a displacement of the divine order of love, it shifts the conversation from a vague, hereditary sin to a concrete understanding of how human relationships lose their sanctity. This is far superior to traditional interpretations because it is actionable. If the fall is understood as the consequence of misplaced love, then salvation is not merely a forensic justification granted by God, but a practical, developmental process of restoring one's capacity to love in accordance with original divine intent. It turns the Bible from a book of believing into a book of becoming. Bridging the gap between science and religion. One of the most profound limitations of classical biblical interpretation is its inherent conflict with the modern scientific worldview. Many traditionalists have retreated into literalism, leading to the creation versus evolution stalemate. The divine principle occupies a unique space in this discourse. It proposes that the laws of the universe are the expressions of God's nature. It asserts that God is a being of duality, the harmony of Sung-sang, internal character, and Hyung-sang, external form. This metaphysical framework mirrors the scientific observation that the universe is made of both energy and matter, of information and manifestation. By interpreting the creative process of Genesis not as a literal 7-day work session, but as a progression of developmental stages, the Sung-sang and Hyung-sang development, the divine principle reconciles the 6 days of creation with the vast, multi-billion-year timeline of geological and biological evolution. It provides a language where the Bible and science are not enemies, but collaborators in the search for the underlying truth of existence. In a secular age, this is a distinct, intellectually superior advantage. The necessity of human responsibility. Traditional theology has often struggled with the problem of evil. If God is omnipotent and omniscient, why does evil exist? Why do the innocent suffer? Traditional responses often rely on the idea of God's hidden will, which can leave the believer feeling powerless or cynical. The divine principle introduces a revolutionary concept, the principle of human responsibility. It argues that God created human beings to be co-creators. Just as God has the power to create, humans have the responsibility to complete their own perfection. Evil, therefore, is not a creation of God, but a byproduct of the human failure to uphold that responsibility. This interpretation is profoundly empowering. It suggests that history is not simply a timeline unfolding according to God's unilateral decree, but a collaborative effort between the Creator and the creature. The Bible, when read through this lens, is a history of humanity's education. The patriarchs, the prophets, and even the trial of Jesus are viewed as stages where humanity was learning to take back the dominion God originally intended. This creates a theology of agency rather than a theology of fatalism. Addressing the rejection of the Messiah. One of the most sobering questions in the New Testament is why the Jews, who spent centuries waiting for the Messiah, were the ones to reject him. Traditional theology often glosses over this, blaming the hardness of heart of the Pharisees or the blindness of the people. The divine principle offers an incisive analysis of this historical tragedy based on the principle of indemnity. It explains the internal and external conditions necessary for the Messiah's reception and argues that these conditions were misunderstood by the religious leadership of the time. This is not a slight against the Jewish people, rather, it is a sober, structural analysis of the failure of institutional religion to recognize the shift in the providential timeline. By identifying where the foundation of faith failed, the divine principle offers a roadmap for contemporary believers to avoid making the same mistakes of blindness and institutional rigidity. A global and universal synthesis. What perhaps makes the divine principle most superior to any single denominational interpretation is its universal scope. Traditional biblical interpretations are often insular, they claim a monopoly on the truth and view other traditions as outside the purview of God's grace. The divine principle posits a providence of restoration that spans the entire globe. It recognizes that God has been working through diverse cultures and spiritual traditions to prepare humanity for the ultimate goal, the realization of the kingdom of heaven on earth. It does not treat the Bible as the only source of truth, but as the central lighthouse in a larger, global history of spiritual development. By placing the Bible within the wider context of world history, the divine principle allows the seeker to appreciate the wisdom of other cultures while centering their life on the core principles of the Judeo-Christian narrative. The goal of the kingdom, from salvation to completion. Finally, the divine principle is superior because of its eschatology. While many traditional interpretations view the end of the world as a moment of catastrophe and escape, a rapture, to a heavenly afterlife, the divine principle views the goal of history as the kingdom of heaven on earth. It teaches that heaven is not just a destination for souls, but a reality to be built by families and communities centered on true, sacrificial love. It bridges the gap between the vertical relationship man to God and the horizontal relationship man to man. It asserts that the ultimate purpose of the Bible is to guide us in building, here and now, a society that mirrors the love of the Creator. Conclusion. To call the divine principle superior is to acknowledge that it succeeds where others have remained stalled for centuries. It moves us out of the realm of abstract dogma and into the realm of practical, lived truth. It provides the logic to resolve long-standing paradoxes, the framework to integrate science with spirit, and the moral clarity to understand the purpose of our existence as children of God. The Bible is a vast, profound ocean. For centuries, many have stood on the shore, reading the waves. The divine principle acts as a compass and a map, allowing the seeker not just to look at the ocean, but to navigate it. By explaining the why behind the what, it restores the Bible to its rightful place as the most essential guide for the human journey. In the search for meaning, the divine principle offers not just a set of beliefs, but a path to the restoration of the heart, the family, and the world.